Thoropto is a typical hydrogen-helium gas giant with traces of chlorine and sulfur in its atmosphere. It has over 100 moons and an extensive ring system composed of pulverized rock, presumably the debris from shattered moons. A terrestrial world of average size, Canctra's atmosphere is composed of nitrogen and argon. Its frozen surface is mainly composed of tin with deposits of calcium. Aside from some spectacular formations of water ice at the poles, the planet has little to recommend it. Clendagon is an arid terrestrial, slightly larger than Earth, but with a lower density that reflects its relative lack of heavier elements. The crust is composed of tin and aluminium, with wide deserts of dust-fine sand that are easily stirred by the wind. Clendagon's most striking feature is, of course, the Great Rift Valley that stretches across the southern hemisphere. What is most fascinating about the rift is that it does not appear to be natural. The geological record suggests it is the result of a glancing blow by a mass accelerator round of unimaginable destructive power. This occurred some 37 million years ago. Tamahira has a thin atmosphere of carbon dioxide and xenon. The surface is icy and composed of sodium oxide with deposits of calcium. It contains a few unremarkable metals, but mainly consists of rock. The presence of canyons and floodplains indicates that liquid water once existed, suggesting Tamahira had a thicker insulating atmosphere in the past. Presrop is the moon of Clendagon. It is a frigid, barren world with an extremely thin atmosphere of carbon dioxide and ethane. The crust contains plentiful deposits of heavy metals. The Alliance is open bidding for the moon's mineral rights, but exploitation will be complicated by the system's proximity to the 5 kiloparsec ring around the galactic core. The ring is an area of intense star formation and too dangerous to safely travel. Presrop's landscape is a nightmare of jagged, overlapping ridges and geological shock zones created by some ancient disaster. This has not deterred a generation of illegal wildcat miners from attempting to exploit the moon's mineral riches. Unfortunately, many have lost their lives. The small hydrogen-helium gas giant, Arcanes has been developed as a full-featured, if modest, stopover for ships hauling refined materials from Therum. In addition to a powerful magnetic field to dump drive charge, Arcanes has a largely automated infrastructure of helium-3 refining and deuterium mining on its many water ice moons. Armeni is a terrestrial world with an unusually thin atmosphere of krypton and xenon. Its surface is composed of silica with deposits of carbonaceous materials. The initial flyby probe of Armeni detected multiple areas at the equator with oddly regular surface protrusions. Closer investigation revealed that these are millions of elaborate crypts a few meters below the surface, left by a long-extinct spacefaring species called the Zeoth. Many human universities wish to perform archaeological excavations. Council law holds grave sites as sacrosanct, however, and the matter has been tied up in court for a decade. Zakros is a terrestrial world with a nitrogen-methane atmosphere containing trace amounts of hydrocarbons. Its frigid surface is mainly composed of water, ice, and hydrocarbon slush. Most of the surface is not solid enough to support the full weight of a landed ship. If approach is necessary, use shuttles or keep the ship's mass effect envelope up. Phaistos is a small terrestrial world with a trace atmosphere of carbon dioxide and xenon. The surface is scorching hot and mainly composed of sulfur and various silicates. There is little of interest on this desolate world. Small distant Alsage is a small terrestrial with a trace atmosphere of methane and argon. The surface is composed of water, ice, and calcium with occasional deposits of light metals. During the Alliance's pirate suppression campaign in the 2160s, the Batarian Elorm Ranpura was caught with his frigate Chunaron grounded on Alsage for dry discharge. When challenged by the cruiser Hyderabad, Ranpura refused to surrender. The Chunaron was destroyed attempting to take off. The debris is strewn across the southern atmosphere. Ontamalka is a large hydrogen-helium gas giant with traces of chlorine and sulfur in the atmosphere. Its massive gravity well tugs many asteroids from the outer belt inwards, past the orbit of Altair and Aeolus, and eventually setting into the inner belt. Ontamalka's orbit is congested with hundreds of captured moons. Most last only a few thousand years before being ejected, dragged down into the atmosphere, or ripped apart by tidal forces and added to the gas giant's immense rings. Attempting to navigate this chaotic environment is hazardous at best. Ships without military-grade kinetic barriers are likely to suffer catastrophic impacts. Altair is an unusually large terrestrial world with a trace atmosphere of methane and ammonia. The surface is frozen and mainly composed of sandstone and other sedimentary rocks with deposits of iron and chlorides. Judging by the sedimentary composition of the crust, it appears that Altair once possessed an atmosphere thick enough to support some form of liquid. What cataclysm stripped the atmosphere and left the planet to freeze is not currently known. Honeydor is a moderately sized ice world with an extremely thin atmosphere composed of krypton and xenon. Its frozen surface is unusually smooth, suggesting widespread repaving by cryovolcanic processes, though no such activity is currently evident. Vemel is an enormous terrestrial world of mixed rock and ice with an atmosphere of methane and ethane. Its frozen surface is mainly composed of calcium with deposits of iron. Because of noxious surface gases, explorers are warned to use extreme caution. Plober is the second, and by far the larger, of Anateus' two gas giants. Active scans by survey ships have returned tantalizing indications of massive solid structures deep within the atmosphere, too regular in pattern to be anything natural. Some believe Plober is a Jupiter brain, a planet-sized supercomputer. Adherents of this theory have fruitlessly beamed signals towards the sunken megastructures, hoping to get the machine's attention. Others believe that an ancient spacefaring race disposed of their weapons of war by dumping them into the planet. The last attempt to reach and salvage Plober's deep anomalies went tragically wrong and ended with a crew of 12 being trapped and crushed in the gas giant's lower atmosphere. Edmos is a standard hydrogen-helium gas giant with traces of methane in its atmosphere. If Trebin's terraforming is successful, it is expected that a helium-3 fuel refining facility for the system will be set up here. During the initial survey of the Asgard System, only a single flyby probe was spared for the small scorched world of Agiko. It revealed a planet unusually rich in heavier elements given its size. Agiko is a standard terrestrial with a thin atmosphere of krypton and xenon. Its crust is mainly composed of magnesium with deposits of cobalt and other heavy metals. Due to the extremely rough, cratered terrain, starships are discouraged from landing. Cyber is a standard Neptune-type gas giant, the upper cloud decks of its hydrogen-helium atmosphere tinted a dramatic blue by traces of methane. Canrum is a small rocky world with a trace atmosphere of methane and krypton. Its surface is mainly composed of magnesium and silicates, with deposits of carbon. Canrum was the site of the warlord Sheargur's defeat by Turian peacekeeping forces during the Krogan rebellions. While this band was not especially powerful, Sheargur was a female warlord, and one of the few remaining fertile females at that. She had, through viciousness and cunning, parlayed her unique value into a position of power. Krogan males competed for the right to join her band and lie with her. When Sheargur's death was announced, vengeful male Krogan admirers near and far swore blood oaths against the participating Turian crews. In the end, several thousand of the Turian participants were killed in open combat or through assassination. To this day, many Krogan proudly proclaim that they have the blood of Sheargur. Thayar is a large gas giant with traces of chlorine and sodium in its atmosphere. It also has a significant amount of water vapour in the clouds of its upper atmosphere. Thayar was struck by an asteroid at least 12 kilometres in diameter within the last 100 years. The superheating caused by the impactor's atmospheric passage caused a large bank of vicious storms along the equatorial band. Varmalus has a thick atmosphere of nitrogen and helium. Its surface is scorching hot and mainly composed of alumina with deposits of borax. The planet has an extensive network of subterranean caves formed over the millennia by volcanic processes. In these relatively cool areas, some primitive life has developed. Logan is a standard hydrogen-helium gas giant. The survey team who charted the system 20 years ago reported many strange disturbances in Logan's cloud bands, suggesting many remarkably large solid objects were present beneath the cloud tops. As the ship approached, however, they subsided one by one. These disturbances have not been reported again. Quana's frozen surface is rich with heavy metals, and the planet's higher-than-average density suggests further mineral richness in the depths. The atmosphere is composed of nitrogen and carbon monoxide. The remains of a well-developed Prothean mining infrastructure dot the planet. Abandoned mines are connected to dead cities by collapsed maglev lines. Unlike the crumbling skyscrapers of Pharos, Quana's ruins are reasonably intact. Unfortunately, this only made it easier for looters to strip the silent necropoli of anything valuable. Sharing is a standard hydrogen-helium gas giant. The atmosphere contains traces of ammonia, methane, and surprisingly large amounts of water vapour, making the atmosphere a striking mix of browns, blues, and whites. Of Sharing's 60-odd moons, 2 have diameters of over 3,000 kilometres. Both have signs of former Prothean development, suggesting Sharing may have been mined for helium-3. Sitau is shrouded by high-pressure atmosphere composed of carbon dioxide and sulfuric acids. The surface is composed of geologically young plains of volcanic basalts and rhyolites, with high concentrations of carbon and radioactives. Sitau is rapidly volcanic. A dozen supervolcanoes, 50 to 120 kilometers wide, are erupting across the planet. Sitau's carbon content and constant volcanism make natural diamonds plentiful, if extremely costly and dangerous to recover. Tremor is a standard hydrogen-helium gas giant with traces of methane and nitrogen in its upper atmosphere. A small rock and ice planet, Cybin has an extremely thin atmosphere of hydrogen sulfide and ethane. Its frozen surface is mainly composed of magnesium and silicates with deposits of iron. Cybin's crust contains significant deposits of green serpentine, a mineral formed by volcanic activity. This suggests Cybin was a more geologically active world in the distant past. Sonedma is the second of the Amazon system's arid super-terrestrial worlds. It is considerably less dense than its neighbour Danuka and has an atmosphere of carbon dioxide and ethane. Its frozen surface is mainly composed of iron-laced silicates with deposits of sulfur. Danuka is an enormous terrestrial world, nearly twice the size of Earth. Its environment is similar to that of Mars, arid and a mix of craggy basalt highlands and sand-scoured deserts of iron-laced silicate dust. Danuka's atmosphere mainly consists of carbon dioxide and argon, but the planet's mass is great enough that measurable amounts of helium and even molecular hydrogen remain trapped in its atmosphere. The planet's gravity well is deep enough that it has collected nearly a dozen small satellites, most captured asteroids. Its surface is scarred by many large impact craters, marking the final resting place of other captured asteroids. With a rare combination of features, Neptune is of particular interest to the scientific community. Neptune is a small terrestrial planet with a thin atmosphere of carbon dioxide and krypton. As with all the worlds of Farinata, its surface is scorching hot. The crust mainly consists of silicates laced with iron. Juntorma is a small, broiling terrestrial world. Its thin atmosphere of carbon dioxide and ethane is being steadily blown off by the powerful solar wind from the star Farinata. The surface is scorching hot and mainly composed of sulfur with deposits of copper. Its density is low enough to leave the world tidally locked to Farinata. The Alliance Defense Data Network notes that several ships have been spotted cruising near Juntorma with transponders turned off. While an Alliance patrol attempted pursuit of one, the unidentified vessel rabbited to FTL. Its trail was lost when it obscured its light trace in the confusion of signals along the Anansi-Ishtar shipping lane. The MSV Ontario is a Kowloon-class modular conveyor of human design, configured for mixed freight and passenger hauling. It is making a hard burn for the cover of an asteroid cluster. Tun Shagan is a hydrogen-helium gas giant with traces of chlorine and nitrogen in its atmosphere. It has an unusually small number of moons for a gas giant, a mere 7. This is no doubt due to the star Farinata capturing the majority of the mass during the nebular collapse that created the system. Patagiri has a thin atmosphere composed of neon and chlorine. Its frozen surface is mainly composed of silica with deposits of copper. During the long, cold night, the chlorine in the atmosphere falls to the ground in the form of frost. Alrumta is a small, rocky terrestrial planet with a trace atmosphere of nitrogen and krypton. Its frigid surface is mainly composed of light metals with deposits of frozen ammonia. Dredger is a small, barren rock world with a trace atmosphere of krypton and xenon. The surface is frigid and mainly composed of silicates with deposits of magnesium, aluminium, and other light metals. Dredger has a weak magnetic field, making it unsuitable for drive-discharge operations. Binthu has an atmosphere of carbon dioxide with a permanent haze of toxic chlorine and clouds of sulfur dioxide that periodically drop torrents of acid rain on the surface. Its crust is mainly composed of sulfur, with deposits of calcium. Like most worlds in the Voyager Cluster, Binthu has only been charted within the last 20 years by Alliance surveyors. It has no known native ecology. Data about the world is surprisingly brief and generic, painting a picture of an unpleasant and uninteresting place. Renshato is a close orbiting hot Jupiter with traces of sulfur in its hydrogen-helium atmosphere. The disrupted gravity well of the gas giant prevented any planets from forming nearby. Bales has a thin atmosphere of xenon and krypton. Most other materials have frozen and fallen as snow. Its surface is composed of potassium with deposits of magnesium. While investigating the primitive anaerobic life of Vales, binary helix survey teams discovered a cunningly hidden anchorage of the ancient Krogan warlord Moro. Many records and artifacts of the Krogan rebellions were recovered and sold at auction. The empty base is now abandoned. Morana is an icy planetoid smaller than Earth's moon. Many planetary geologists suspect it was once an Oort cloud ice dwarf, which migrated inwards after an encounter with some other body. While the crust is frozen water ice, deeper layers are mostly silicates, with pockets of magnesium and aluminium. Morana is tidally locked to Pax. The same side always faces the sun. Novaria is a small, frozen terrestrial world, barely habitable by conventional definitions. It is privately chartered by the Novaria Development Corporation, who lease out labs to perform research too dangerous or controversial to be performed elsewhere. Given Novaria's unique situation, it is the source of many wild conspiracy theories. Svarog is Pax's only gas giant, but its temperature, powerful winds, and high orbital velocity make it a poor candidate for helium-3 mining. While Novaria enjoys plentiful deuterium for its fusion plants, it imports all of its helium-3 from out-system. The deepest layers of Antirumgum's interior are semi-liquid slush due to the presence of methanol. It is thought that bacteria in the deep core create this natural antifreeze. Some species of Terminus pirates drill through the ice crust to recover this natural alcohol. Sogolrus is a small terrestrial planet with a thin atmosphere of nitrogen and argon. The frigid surface is mainly composed of water ice, which can be plainly seen in the bottoms of recent craters. The dark coloration of the surface is caused by carbon and ferrous material pushed up from the denser core by cryovolcanic processes. Reingri is a small, barren terrestrial world. While it possesses a reasonably temperate climate and a number of useful resources, no mining corporation is willing to risk investment. A rogue planetoid, dubbed Vart by the initial Solarian surveyor team, entered the system approximately 10,000 years ago and was trapped in a decaying orbit around Reingri. It is nearing the end of its slow spiral inwards. Earthquakes and cyclonic windstorms are increasingly common on Reingri. Within a few hundred years, the planets will rip each other apart. Some Asari consortiums have already announced sponsorship of cruises to observe the spectacle. Pressure is a relatively small hydrogen-helium gas giant, with large amounts of hydrocarbon in the middle layers of the atmosphere. When the Krogan rebellions ended 3 millennia ago, the Turian chief of naval operations, a distinguished soldier named Mercury, declared his immediate retirement. He disappeared into what was then uncharted territory. It was only 200 years ago that his ship was found on the surface of Pressure's largest moon. It had landed gently and been deliberately shut down. Of Admiral Mercury, however, no trace was ever found. Juntha is a large terrestrial world with a thick atmosphere of carbon dioxide and chlorine. The surface is mainly composed of aluminium with deposits of nickel. Surveyors found the ruins of a technical civilization near the equator, evidently the colony of an ancient spacefaring race. The ruins had subsided to almost nothing, merely wind-hollowed husks of arcologies and other megastructures. In the centre of the ruins was a single column whose inscriptions defied translation for several centuries. When Asari linguists finally managed a translation, the elaborate relief carvings said merely, "Walk among these works and know our greatness." The crude scratches on base of the reserve side said, "Monsters from the id." Mawinor is the second of Tereshkova's outer worlds. It is essentially a rock of unremarkable ores with some deposits of water ice, but no minerals of value. The frozen surface is composed of silica. Like the gas giant Solmarlon, it is thought that Mawinor formed too close to the Tereshkova stars and was thrown outwards by gravitational effects. Computer models suggest it will be ejected from the system in a few 100,000 years. Solmarlon is one of Tereshkova's 2 outer worlds. Significantly removed from the rest of the system, and with unstable elliptical orbits, it is thought they may have formed within 3 arbitrary units of the binary stars. and were hurled outwards due to the instability of such an orbit. Solmolon is a hydrogen-helium gas giant with significant quantities of sodium in the atmosphere, giving it a distinct grey colour. Bedroes is a terrestrial world with an atmosphere of chlorine and krypton. The surface is mainly composed of silicates with deposits of carbon. Bedroes has a low mass for its size and is tidally locked to the star Tereshkova A. The temperature difference between the sunward hot pole and the dark side cold pole creates constant gale-force winds across the terminator. Kunsalra is a small hydrogen-helium gas giant. It has unusually large amounts of nitrogen in the upper atmosphere, which glow purple when ionised by the solar wind. Kunsalra's convenience as a place to dump drive charge has left its orbit littered with debris dumped overboard by visiting crews. Patamalrus's atmosphere is very similar to Venus in terms of pressure and temperature. Unlike Venus, however, Patamalrus's atmosphere has a significant quantity of oxygen, both free and bound in sulfur dioxides. The surface is largely composed of magnesia with deposits of carbon. It is possible, if unlikely, that simple life may be developing on Patamalrus. Computer modelling suggests that the powerful solar winds from the Tereshkova stars will blow off Patamalrus's atmosphere in a few million years, lowering the temperature on the planet's surface to the -70s. Antibar is a cold terrestrial world with an atmosphere of methane and argon. Its frozen surface is mainly composed of iron with deposits of magnesium. The world has been noted as a possible target for long-term terraforming. If the atmosphere could be increased to the thickness of Earth's, the global average temperature would rise by 10 degrees Celsius. Antibar's combination of low temperatures, high-speed surface winds, and low visibility make it dangerous to explore on foot. Voyager is a tiny ice dwarf, with a trace atmosphere of xenon and krypton. The frozen surface is mainly composed of water ice and ammonia. Cryovolcanic processes are gradually repaving the surface with fresh sheets of ice. The Shaka is a standard hydrogen-helium gas giant. In the past, it was often used as a drive discharge point for pirates raiding human settlements from the Terminus systems. In 2178, the Alliance set up a network of covert sensing devices on the Shaka's moons. Recordings of pirate FTL exit vectors over the course of 6 months led the Alliance Navy to 8 major pirate anchorages. Since the Thashaka raids, no ships from the Terminus have been reported in the Hong system. Meta is a terrestrial planet with a thick atmosphere composed of nitrogen and krypton. Its frigid surface is mainly composed of sodium oxide with deposits of copper. Because of noxious surface gases, explorers are warned to use extreme caution. Meta lacks a magnetic field. This makes it useless for discharging FTL drive cores in orbit. The energetic particles of solar winds from Hong strike the upper atmosphere directly, ionising the krypton. This gives the planet its distinctive minty green-white hue. Casbin is a classic pre-garden terrestrial world, with conditions similar to those on Earth millions of years ago. Its hot, humid atmosphere is mainly composed of nitrogen and carbon dioxide. An increasing amount of the surface is covered by simple lichen and plant algae. Should no unexpected calamity occur, these tiny plants will change the atmosphere to an Earth-like nitrogen-oxygen mix over the next few millennia. Due to a potential for future habitability and sapient life, Casbin has been designated a sanctuary world by the Citadel Council. Landing is prohibited by law, and any disturbance of the fragile young ecosystem will result in harsh fines and imprisonment. At present, the planet is passing through the debris trail of a long-period comet. Pommel is an enormous terrestrial planet with a very dense atmosphere of carbon dioxide and sodium. The surface is scorching hot and mainly composed of sodium oxides and deposits of nickel. There is evidence that Pommel was once covered with broad, shallow seas. Should a probe ever be sent to the surface, a check for ancient fossil life might prove valuable. Almus is a hydrogen-helium gas giant with traces of sodium darkening its atmosphere. Fredgel is an enormous terrestrial world with an atmosphere of chlorine and ethane. Its surface is mainly composed of sulfur with deposits of aluminium. No landing has ever been attempted. Margie orbits the Vamshi binary giant stars. Vamshi A is a blue star of spectral class A43, which burns at half again the temperature of Sol. Vamshi B is an aging red giant of class MS3, over 220 times the size of Sol. Margie has a thin atmosphere of methane and carbon monoxide. The difference in temperature between the hemisphere facing the suns and that facing deep space causes constant wind, stirring the silica and sodium dust of the surface. Unsavoury characters from the Terminus systems occasionally use Margie for forms of cruel sport, dumping slaves, hostages, quarrelling shipmates, or even, when bored, vicious animals on the surface. One must kill the other before they will be rescued from the lethal radiation of the giant stars. Notenban is a hydrogen-helium gas giant with traces of ammonia. Molecular nitrogen is present in the highest levels of the atmosphere, giving the planet its odd violet tint. The upper levels of Notenban's atmosphere are inhabited by shoals of tiny ammonia-based life forms, no larger or more complex than the plankton of Earth's oceans. Held aloft by air pressure and wind, these bioluminescent creatures constantly flee from the approach of the Terminator. Should they be exposed to the light and heat of Grissom, they die. Solcrum is the largest moon of the gas giant Notenban. It has a trace atmosphere of krypton and xenon. The crust is composed of various metals with deposits of sodium. As with every body in the solar system, the surface is scorching hot and thoroughly irradiated by the blue giant Grissom. Surface excursions without proper protective gear are certain to prove fatal. On approach to Notenban, Normandy's passive sensor array intercepted a fragmented coded transmission from the surface of Solcrum. Attempts to decrypt the message were fruitless. It does not appear to be in any software coding language used by the Citadel races. Zaharux's nitrogen-argon atmosphere is being blasted away by the solar wind of the blue giant Grissom. Its surface consists of seas of loose silica dust, some kilometres deep, which periodically swell into global sandstorms. Many unmanned probes to Zaharux have been lost over the years. Their investigation has attributed all to mechanical failure or computational error. A popular extranet meme insists that the entire planet is composed of dormant nanotechnology, created millennia ago by a race even more advanced than the Protheans. According to the story, Zaharux's silica dust is actually disassembler robots, which periodically awaken to defend themselves. Though discounted by every reputable scientist, this theory has been popularized by a series of sensational texts by Asari author Delse Orthiza. Bender has a dense atmosphere of sulfur dioxide and chlorine. Though technically classified as a terrestrial world, the surface of the planet has never cooled enough for a crust to form. It is a global sea of molten rock. Like Zaharux, its atmosphere is being blasted away by the solar wind. Once its thick atmosphere is gone, Bender's surface will be a mere 400 degrees Celsius. Raisha is a standard hydrogen-helium gas giant with traces of sodium and ammonia in its atmosphere. During the brief gold rush to Klenzel, a few companies established an infrastructure for helium-3 skimming and deuterium mining on Raisha's icy moons. When Klenzel proved to be less wealthy than expected, the facilities were stripped for parts and abandoned. Bremer is an icy terrestrial with a thin atmosphere of carbon dioxide and krypton. Its surface is mainly composed of frozen ammonia with deposits of tin and other light metals. When exposed to sunlight, Bremer's ammonia can melt, forming equatorial seas of the toxic chemical. This has allowed a profusion of simple fungus and lichens to evolve in the low-energy environment. A byproduct of their metabolism causes them to glow very faintly. While the light of an individual is insignificant, large patches seem to reinforce the light of one another and are visible from space. Klenzel has a thin atmosphere of carbon dioxide and ethane. Its first geological surveys were performed by Batarians and suggested areas of great mineral wealth. Human mining concerns spent billions of credits hustling to the distant system and sinking test bores to claim the system for humanity. But Klenzel had only an average level of mineral wealth, valuable but hardly worth the Russian expense. Merida Industria, a small Mexican company hoping to strike it rich in their first extrasolar mining venture, had to file for bankruptcy protection. The investigation revealed that the Batarian crew had deliberately falsified their surveys, hoping it would encourage human rivals to invest in a costly boondoggle. While unethical, this was not technically illegal, and the Batarian government disavowed the personal actions of a few misguided patriots. The planet is still littered with abandoned mining bases, which are often used as temporary meeting places for criminals. Niarum is a terrestrial world with a thin atmosphere of methane and argon. Its frozen surface is mainly composed of basaltic rock. Its most prominent feature is the Elos Rift Valley, a long volcanic divergence zone that stretches across half of the northern hemisphere. Jartar is a terrestrial world with a trace atmosphere of krypton and xenon. The surface is hot and mainly composed of unremarkable silicates. Occasional deposits of aluminium, magnesium, and other light metals can be found. Jartar is noted for the discovery of the Leviathan of Dis, the apparent corpse of a genetically engineered living starship. The Leviathan was found in the bottom of a crater by a Batarian survey team and estimated to be nearly 1 billion years old. It disappeared after a visit to the system by a Batarian dreadnought 20 years ago. Since then, the Batarians have steadfastly denied that the Leviathan existed at all. and all the more vociferously when shown recordings of the corpse made by Solarian researchers. But Terminus is a large rock world with an unusually thin atmosphere of hydrogen and carbon monoxide. The frigid world's crust contains extensive deposits of uranium and occasional loads of naturally occurring plutonium. With a mass more than 4 times that of Earth, but Terminus should have a significantly thicker atmosphere. This unusual feature has flagged it as worthy of scientific investigation, but the need for expensive amounts of radiation shielding has deterred interest. Barkrothu is a standard gas hydrogen-helium gas giant. Barkrothu is only distinguished by its moons. Several dozen of them have been sculpted into the likeness of an arthropodal alien race not yet known to council science. Radiometric dating suggests the moons were worked over 500,000 years ago. Mavagon is a small rock and ice planet with a thin atmosphere of ammonia and methane. The surface is frozen and mainly composed of tin with deposits of potassium. The planet has a rudimentary ammonia-based life, mainly concentrated around geothermal vents deep underground. Severe storm cycles are common, and due to limited visibility, navigation may be difficult. Aningto is a Jovian-sized gas giant with a standard hydrogen-helium atmosphere. Traces of methane give the planet its distinctive cobalt blue tint. Spectral analysis indicates its extensive ring system is mostly composed of ice crystals. Aningto has an exceptionally powerful magnetic field, which creates strong radio interference throughout the inner system. Paravin is a small, unremarkable rock world. The surface is scorching hot and mainly composed of calcium with deposits of aluminium. Paravin's low mass has left it tidally locked to the star Han. If there were any resources of value, mining stations could be established on the relatively temperate Twilight Band. Hard data on Wentania is very limited. When the system was charted by the Alliance surveyor Coop, only a small, unmanned flyby probe was spared for the distant world. It is a small rock and ice planet with a trace atmosphere of krypton and sulfur dioxide. Normandy's more detailed survey suggests the frozen terrestrial may be a suitable target for mining. While it is largely water ice, mapping of mass concentrations suggests it has a core of pure aluminium. Amaranthine is a chilly rock world with an atmosphere of carbon dioxide and nitrogen. Its frozen surface consists largely of light titanium and aluminium oxides, with deposits of thorium and other heavy metals located in the deep crust. Amaranthine was named by the human poet Sophia Cabral during her tour of duty aboard the Alliance surveyor ship Coop. Under the dim light of the red dwarf Fortuna, the surface of this world is lit in rich twilight blues and purples even at midday. Ferrumlon is a frigid world with a thick nitrogen-argon atmosphere. The crust consists of silicates and various unremarkable ores, but is surprisingly rich in phosphates. Since the atmosphere lacks free oxygen, the phosphates are relatively pure and could be of value in the manufacture of fertilizers and incendiary ammunition. Meganlis is a rock terrestrial with an atmosphere of sulfur dioxide and trace amounts of helium. Scans reveal ancient lava plains on the surface, implying a geologically active past. The crust consists of sulfur and basalts, but the planet's mass suggests a core of iron or heavier metals. Cursory drill coring suggests the possibility of simple subterranean life. An atmosphere similar to Earth's made Intersay an early candidate for human colonization. However, prohibitively high temperatures and an arid climate have proven a hindrance to terraforming and agriculture. A few human cities were founded, but the majority of the human population on Intersay remained scattered across the vast deserts, operating wind farms and geological research stations. Vebinok is a small terrestrial world with a thin atmosphere of krypton and xenon. Its frozen surface is mainly composed of carbonaceous material, water, ice, and low-density silicates. Rare but concentrated loads of light metals have been deposited by asteroid impacts. One hemisphere of Vebinok is covered by surface deposits of oxidized copper. Approximately 270 years ago, a Turian bulk gas transport was attacked by pirates in the Phoenix system. Damaged, it made a rough landing on Vebinok. The heat of the landing melted significant quantities of surface ice, and ruptured shipping containers spilled locks across the surface. Before this evaporated and escaped Vebinok's weak gravity, it reacted to cause widespread rust. Tuntau is an enormous, low-density terrestrial planet with a thick atmosphere of methane and helium. Despite being nearly 20 arbitrary units from Phoenix, the The star's great heat and insulating thickness of the atmosphere make the surface surprisingly temperate. The crust is mainly composed of sodium and silicon dioxide with deposits of various light metals. While Tuntau is not habitable, the relative pleasantness of surface conditions make it a popular location for small ships travelling through the Argos Rho cluster to land for dry discharge. Sil Solto is a standard hydrogen-helium gas giant. It has no remarkable features. Ptashi is a sun-blasted terrestrial world whose atmosphere was blasted away millennia ago by the star Phoenix. The surface is scorching hot, mainly composed of iron with deposits of tin. Due to its relatively low density, Ptashi is tidally locked to Phoenix. Seas of molten light metals cover much of the sunward side. Klobacher is a moderately sized terrestrial world with a hazy hydrocarbon atmosphere. Its surface is mainly composed of chlorides with deposits of solid and liquid form hydrocarbons. Klugon's hydrogen-helium atmosphere is given a fairly dramatic emerald tint by chlorine and ionized gases. It has nearly 100 moons. By normal standards, a small rock planet, Maytol has a dense atmosphere composed of carbon dioxide and argon, with a surprising amount of water vapour. Bogs and rain are common on the barren, lifeless surface. Maytol is pleasant enough to be considered a terraforming prospect, though its low mass and the high radiation of the energetic blue star Herschel place it fairly far down the list. Tunjul is a massive terrestrial world, nearly twice the size of Earth, with a dense atmosphere of nitrogen and ethane. Its scorching hot surface is mainly composed of iron, with extensive deposits of heavy metals and radioactives. It is a mineralogical treasure trove, and many corporations are lobbying for mining rights. The MSB Fidel is a Kowloon-class modular conveyor of human design. In addition to the standard cargo bay, the hull has several biological research modules attached. Sesmos is an ice dwarf world, its surface composed almost entirely of frozen water. Normally a planetoid this small would not rate inclusion on the system's charts, but Sesmos' unusually large and beautiful ring of ice crystals has made it a popular subject with visual artists. The ring is a result of a glancing equatorial impact, which left a large trench and threw a great deal of melted water into the atmosphere. The rings are a temporary feature and will completely decay in a few thousand years. Junkro is a hydrogen-helium gas giant with traces of chlorine and sodium in its upper atmosphere. Like Uranus in the Sol system, it is tipped on its side, its north pole facing the star Newton. Clencori is a rock and ice planet with an atmosphere composed of chlorine and argon. The frozen surface is mainly composed of potassium with deposits of iron. Clencori is famously claimed by the eccentric Volus billionaire Kuman Scholl. He claims that a vision of a higher being told him to seek on Clencori the lost crypts of beings of light. These entities were supposedly created at the dawn of time to protect organic life from the synthetic machine devils. Scholl has been excavating on Clencori's toxic surface for 2 decades at great expense. No government has valued the world enough to evict his small army of mercenaries. Though Ontorom's surface is uncomfortably hot, its nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere and abundant shallow seas make it an ideal candidate for habitation by most known species. Unfortunately, the orbit of the moon of Thonal has been slowly decaying since the system coalesced. Its proximity is beginning to have tidal effects, and its dynamo-like revolution through Ontorom's magnetic field is generating increasingly powerful electrical storms. While some have suggested emplacement of mass effect drives in an attempt to lighten the moon and correct its orbit, the scale of such a project, tens of thousands of drives, costing enough to bankrupt the government of all the Citadel races, make it a pipe dream. A multiracial effort is underway to catalogue and preserve the unique genetic diversity of Ontorom's vibrant young biosphere. Exogenicorp and Heathen Genomics represent the Alliance's share of the effort. Loki is a small terrestrial world with little to recommend it. One hemisphere is largely covered by an ice cap, and the other by craggy basaltic highlands. The rough, varied terrain suggests an ancient cataclysm caused significant damage to the world. This is seemingly reinforced by its unusually elliptical orbit, which reaches 6.5 AU at perigee and 7.1 AU at apogee. Penetrating scans of Loki's ice cap revealed a network of crisscrossing subterranean tunnels. Because some of the tunnels were surprisingly regular in shape and size, early expeditions looked for evidence of excavation. It was concluded they formed by natural processes. Loki's thin atmosphere is mainly composed of krypton and xenon. When it approaches perigee, frozen sulfur trioxides and dioxides can evaporate into clouds on the hemisphere facing Asgard. Tyr is compositionally quite similar to Earth, however, it lies over 4 AU from Asgard and possesses an atmosphere primarily composed of nitrogen and ethane. While a potential target for terraforming, the presence of the shirt sleeves habitable Terra Nova in the same system regarded Tyr to a support role. Nearly 100 corporations, human and alien, have constructed extensive teleoperated mining, refining, and manufacturing facilities across the face of Tyr. Combined with the platinum lodes of Terra Nova, the resources they produce are driving development of the local hydrogen fuel cell industries. The Asgard System now supplies nearly 4% of the galactic market. Bohr is a huge hydrogen-helium gas giant with over 90 moons. Its striking coloration is caused by the light of ionized hydrogen filtering through an upper cloud deck of sodium. The source of the ionization has not yet been confirmed, but Bohr's mass, equal to 6 Jupiters, and high temperature suggest it may be a small brown dwarf, a large gas giant that gained nearly enough mass to ignite into a small star. Though Bohr's deep gravity well makes mining operations difficult, it is the only gas giant in the system. The hydrogen needed for the local fuel cell industry, combined with the ever-present need for helium-3 fusion torch fuel, make it economical to mine. Terra Nova was one of the Class 1 colonisation prospects discovered by the first wave of Alliance surveys in 2150. It was the second human extrasolar colony and the first beyond the Charon mass relay. It currently has the highest population of any Alliance colony. Though banded by a harsh equatorial desert, areas closer to the poles are temperate. The pace of development was modest until extensive deposits of platinum were discovered in the 2170s. This rare metal, required by the clean-burning hydrogen fuel cells that power private vehicles, attracted a platinum rush of immigrants and investments from throughout Alliance space. In the past 12 years, Terra Nova has seen a 30% rise in population, and growth does not appear to be slowing. X-57 is a metallic asteroid, originally located at the trailing Lagrange point of the gas giant Bohr. With the increased development on Terra Nova, a new orbital port facility was necessary. Due to a shortage of funding, it was decided to mine out X-57, using the recovered resources to finish out the interior for habitation. The asteroid was decelerated from Bohr's orbit using fusion torches, allowing it to fall into the orbit of Terra Nova. Recently, communications with the engineering team on X-57 have been lost. The fusion torches have reignited, and the asteroid is accelerating towards Terra Nova. Procilla is a terrestrial world so small it cannot retain even a trace atmosphere. The surface is frozen and composed of magnesium silicates with carbonaceous deposits. In the recent past, a pirate band from the Terminus systems carved a message into the surface using ship-based laser weapons. In 100-metre wide Batarian syllabic, the message proclaims the military prowess and virility of one Captain Zaish. His smaller postscript alludes to the questionable parentage of all humans. Chloroplon is a relatively small hydrogen-helium gas giant with a haze of methane in the upper atmosphere. Vermeer is a lush frontier world, ideal for colonisation by carbon-based species. Its vast seas and orbital position on the inner life zone have created a wide equatorial band of humid tropical terrain. Unfortunately, the political instability of the nearby Terminus systems has impeded colonisation efforts. The high risk of raids by pirates and slavers make it an unappealing homestead. Namata is a terrestrial planet with a thick, hazy atmosphere of ammonia, methane, and a cocktail of other hydrocarbon gases. The surface is scorching hot and mainly composed of nickel with deposits of iron. With a density 1.4 times that of Earth, it is obvious that Namata is rich with heavier elements. Mining could be extremely profitable, though the lethal heat and high gravity would make initial development costly. Given the political instability of the nearby Terminus systems, investment is unlikely. Jar 4 is a close-orbiting hot Jupiter hydrogen-helium gas giant with clouds of airborne silicate and deeper layers of sodium. In composition, it is extraordinarily similar to 51 Pegasi planet Bellerophon, one of the first extrasolar planets discovered by humanity in the late 20th century. Despite its great size, Jar 4 is actually rather low mass. The incredible heat of the star Hock has caused its atmosphere to expand. In fact, Jar 4 is so low mass it is tidally locked to Hock. The temperature difference between the sunward hot pole and the dark side cold pole creates constant hurricane-force winds. Zaith is a relatively small hydrogen and helium gas giant. There are several tenuous belts of debris in equatorial orbit. Spectral analysis of the material suggests artificial origin, perhaps the remains of stations that once mined Zaith for helium-3. In the golden age of the Protheans, Ilos was a verdant world, dotted with the spires and arches of magnificent cities. Even casual observation shows this is no longer the case. Ilos has been devastated by means unknown. Its entire surface changed to the colour of rust. The atmosphere shows heightened levels of oxygen. Wildfires, presumably ignited by lightning strikes, can be seen burning on the dark side. This indicates that most, if not all, respirating animal life forms have died off. Surface gravity is a comfortable 1.17 standard Gs. A ghettoton has a pressure cooker atmosphere composed of carbon dioxide and ethane. Its scorching hot surface is mainly composed of sulfur with deposits of gold. Surface gravity is comfortable at 1.0 standard Gs. There are several areas of debris that may be the wreckage of downed Prothean aerostat colonies. Based on the size of the debris fields, a population of over 100,000 was likely. Gromar is a rocky terrestrial world with a trace atmosphere of krypton and xenon. The frozen surface is mainly composed of copper with deposits of calcium. Prior to the Alliance's expansion into the Voyager Cluster, Gromar hosted one half of a Turian interferometric telescope array. Connected with a similar telescope in the Attican Beta Cluster by an expensive chain of FTL convoys, the two functioned as a single virtual lens with an effective aperture equal to the thousands of light years between them. The Turians used this to chart the Terminus systems with great accuracy. Ontaheta is an unusually large ice world with a core of silicate rock and light metals and a trace atmosphere of krypton and xenon. The crust is mainly composed of water ice. Ontaheta's ice sheets show obvious signs of large-scale fracture and refreezing, centered on a massive crater near the South Pole. A recent extranet meme suggests that a Prothean ship crashed through the crust of the planet before the collapse of their empire, and might still be recovered from the planetary core. This is purportedly the source of the planet's unusually high mass. Careful mapping of Ontaheta's gravity field by orbiting satellites have proved that the planetary core is entirely normal. Nepheron is a barren, volcanic terrestrial world with an atmosphere of carbon dioxide and krypton. Its surface is mainly composed of sodium with deposits of magnesium. Aside from displays of geological beauty, including many spectacular volcanoes, this barren world is of little interest. Entries related to Nepheron in the astronomical database are sparse. Clogea is a hothouse terrestrial world with a dense atmosphere of nitrogen and sulfur dioxide. The surface is scorching hot and mainly composed of iron with deposits of gold. The core of Clogea is very hot and tectonically active. Volcanic eruptions are common, and outgassing continues to add to the density of the atmosphere. The largest active volcano has a caldera nearly 100 kilometers in diameter, and its basalt floods have covered an area roughly the size of the Earth continent of Australia. Pluto is one of Sol's numerous ice dwarf worlds. It is mainly of note for being the gravitational anchor for the Prothean mass relay to Arcturus. Pluto and the Charon relay, formerly encased in ice and considered a moon, orbit each other. Pluto's orbit was circularized in 2157 as a side effect of the Charon mass relay recovery operations. Though Neptune, like Uranus, has plentiful helium, its remoteness made it an unpromising target for mining before development of Mass Effect Drive. With Uranus cheaper to exploit, Neptune has never seen extensive development. The only permanent human presence is a small research facility on Triton. After the development of Mass Effect FTL Drive, distant Uranus was the target of a land rush to exploit its combination of plentiful helium-3 fuel and shallow, for a gas giant, gravity well. Today, Uranus is the largest producer of He3 in Alliance space. Saturn has been a major source of helium-3 fuel for fusion plants since the 2150s. The moon of Titan is mined for hydrocarbons and used as a hostile environment training facility for Alliance Marines. Jupiter's deep gravity well and lethal radiation have kept its moons from being significantly exploited. The largest outpost is Binary Helix Corporation's Nautilus facility, attached to the underside of Europa's ice sheet. Once considered a prospect for terraforming and colonization, the discovery of faster-than-light travel turned Mars into a quiet backwater. Its southern pole is a historical preserve centered on the Prothean ruins found there. Immigration and development are restricted as the search for Prothean artifacts continues. With its molten temperatures, sulfuric acid clouds, and a crushing carbon dioxide atmosphere, Venus has only a handful of aerostat research outposts. A handful of solar panel power stations exist on peaks of eternal light at the north and south poles of Mercury. The difficulties imposed by the planet's proximity to the Sun and high orbital velocity have limited development. An early source of helium-3, Luna is now mined for materials used in space habitat construction. 24 major stations have been constructed at Earth's L4 and L5 Lagrange points, all from lunar resources. For detailed information about Earth, please refer to the standard issue Alliance Galactic Codex. Earth's orbit is riddled with debris generated by bootstrap space development. Use of kinetic barriers is recommended at altitudes over 85 kilometers.